I'm Erin Sherman.
I'm Steve Sherman.
And we are here to give a presentation on our Peace Corps service. Steve and I served together in Uganda, Africa.
Uganda is west of Kenya, east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, south of Sudan, and north of Rwanda and Tanzania.
And we served from 2006 to 2008. So when people think of Africa, these are kind of images that come to mind typically. Images of, tribal dancing and the dress and kind of the safari idea with the animals and everything.
Giraffes and elephants and zebras.
Yeah. This was a typical image. This was taken, Steve took this picture close to where we actually lived.
This was a swamp,
yeah,
actually nearby.
Kids carrying water on their heads from the well. This is a clothing store.
Just storefronts along the road.
Yep.
So while we had 3 days of preliminary training in Boston before we even left the States, our group gathered there in Boston and then went as a group, flew to Uganda, where we had 3 months of training in country, where we learned language and culture and technical skills for implementing our project. There were lots of things that we had to learn as we lived there with a host family at night, in the afternoons and at night, and then during the day we would go to the training facility and meet up with our other group Peace Corps volunteer members, and were trained by Peace Corps staff.
So one of the big challenges was just everyday living. We were dealing with a lot of times no electricity, no running water. They cook on charcoal. It's just a very different living experience. Hand washing all of your clothes. And so that was part of the training too, was just basic everyday life, which is one of the ways that the host family helped. That was a big contribution of theirs. And so here, this was at our site, washing clothes, hand washing clothes.
Even ironing was a major challenge because we think of ironing and it has electricity. Mm-hmm. They had coal irons where you would put hot coals into this steel or iron.
Yeah, and have like a container with holes on the sides to let air in, to aerate the fire.
So you'd have to swing the iron around to aerate, to fan the
flames,
the coals,
and to heat it up,
to get it hot, and then so it was a trick not to get all the ash on your new clean clothes.
Yes. Yes.
But that was important. It was important to look smart.
Yes. So this is an example of everyday clothing for the men on the left there. Yep. Just the button-down shirt and the slacks.
Yep.
And then on the right was the more dressed up kind of special occasion. Steve is wearing the kanzu, and they did wear the blazer jacket over the kanzu. And then me and our friend Olive are wearing the gomez, and that's the traditional dress for women.
Especially the Baganda.
Yes, yes. So yes, one of the major challenges was transportation, cause of great amount of anxiety. People could be injured, and often were very injured and would die. We had this was a taxi. As you can see on the bottom there, it says injury time, which was very appropriate.
Sadly.
Yeah. And so, they were only supposed to carry up to 14 people. And the most I counted on one of my rides, I believe, was 28 that we were riding in the taxi.
Painful.
Yes. And
people on top of people.
yes, and for us to get from the city to our site was a 3-hour drive. It was a 3-hour ride on dirt roads mostly.
So it wasn't just people, but also their luggage.
Yes, and this is an example of the luggage.
Not just the suitcase, but also the chickens, the turkey, and the guinea fowl.
Yeah, there were times where there would be goats stuffed underneath the seats.
One volunteer specifically asked, "How do I say in Uganda, your chicken is pecking my foot?"
Yeah, that was a very important thing for her. Children were often carted around the taxi like luggage.
Mm-hmm.
They would just pick them up and move them wherever, and
Yep.
they would just lay or sit wherever they could kind of stuff them.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was a real challenge while we were there.
Shopping, just getting what you need for your daily living was a challenge. This is a store, and there were all kinds of different stores that would specialize kind of in some things, and then there were also general stores where you could get kind of general merchandise. And wherever you went, whatever you were buying, you had to bargain. You had to negotiate the price.
So because we were white people, they expected that we had a lot of money, like all white people, of course. All of us have a lot of money. So the prices would be elevated for us, but we didn't have a lot of money, and we couldn't afford to spend a whole bunch more than everybody else on everything. So it was a constant source of anxiety, and we had to really work at getting the things that we needed for the price that was reasonable.
So in our little town, there were lots of stores that would sell different things, but often the variety was not all that great, except the market would come to town every other week. And then there was lots of different stuff that we could get, lots of different foods and items that we wouldn't normally be able to buy.
Fruit especially was important.
But even potatoes, we could buy potatoes at our local market. You could see those in the bottom right-hand corner. But there was also cabbage and other things. Tomatoes we could almost always get. Mm-hmm. We could always get tomatoes.
Mm-hmm. The pineapples
were amazing.
They had big batches of pineapples that they just lay out on the ground, and they were really good.
At the market.
Yeah, at the market. But you couldn't buy. We didn't know where to get them otherwise.
Yeah.
So.
But you always had to negotiate.
Yep. Negotiate. This is the taxi park, or one of them, in Kampala, the largest city in Uganda.
So this is where you had to board your taxi to get from the capital to pretty much anywhere in the country. And they were organized based on the part of the country that you were going to, and pretty much every taxi went to a town of any significant size in the country. And so you would board this taxi and it would go straight to the town where you wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. This was our home. Our doors were the ones with the bamboo fencing in front because we needed privacy. Before we had that fence, we would have the doors open to let light in during the day, and people would literally stop on the road and just stare at us in our house. We kind of felt like zoo animals. And so our medical officers for Peace Corps said, "You need a fence." So we put up a privacy fence. It helped a lot.
We were very thankful
Yes.
once we had that, because
Yes.
we were able to keep the doors open to keep the home cooler, but we no longer would people just like stop while walking down the street and stare at us.
Mm-hmm. They would have to actually come to our door if they, and they would. We had people every day that came. But,
Yep.
And so where we actually lived, our 2 rooms that we had, were part of a private medical clinic, and they used the other rooms for their office visits, basically, and their procedures and things that they did. A lot of times they were pulling teeth without any kind of anesthesia,
Whew.
and that was not very fun to be around, especially the children.
Everybody got an IV.
Yes, everyone got an IV. Yep.
This was our front room. So we had this one table where we could sit down to eat our meals and
Prep our meals and
prep our meals and yeah.
everything.
We had one small love seat and then some other additional stools and one folding chair. Behind you can see where we kept our dishes, and we even had kind of a drying rack there so that we could dry our dishes there. And then on the wall we had a mural of pictures and cards from back home so that we could be encouraged and reminded of why we were here and why we were doing this.
Yes, and actually the Ugandans very much enjoy looking at our pictures as well.
For
They
sure.
liked that.
For sure.
This was the other part of the same room, just on the other side. This was our cooking station. So we had the gas stove, those were our spices and things, and then in that cabinet we stored some things to keep the vermin out.
Yep. This is our bedroom. So we had this 4-poster bed that was convenient for hanging up our mosquito netting. And in the blue area on the left was our bathing area, which was just kind of a room with a drain where we could hang up a shower, solar shower. We had a solar shower. And then it had a door there. On the right with the blue and yellow, that actually is a door out to the back of the compound.
This is what the compound looked like. And so all these rooms, some of them the healthcare workers lived in, and then many of them were used for the patients of the medical center if they had to stay for any overnight or something. And then in the very back was our latrine. So
once we got to our site, we had to figure out what our project was going to be. And even from the time that we were in Boston, Peace Corps offered us this way of thinking about how we might identify what our project would be. Because even though we had a host organization and they might have some ideas about what they might want us to do, ultimately it was up to us to decide on and develop the project that we were going to implement. And so we had to look first at what we were able to do. But just because we're able to do it doesn't mean that that's what we need to be doing. We also had to look at what the community needed. And just because we can do it and the community needs it doesn't mean that that's what we're supposed to do. We also had to consider also what the Peace Corps goals were. And where those three intersected, that's where we could find something that would be most beneficial for all. And this can be comparable to the way we live our lives in the light of Christian mission. We all have abilities. We live in communities with needs. And then there is Christ's mission in the world. And so where these three come together creates the best opportunity for the work of the church. Now, in the orange section, we might have abilities and it might line up with Christ's mission in the world. But unless we are very intentional about seeking out the needs of the community, we can get into this kind of paternalist attitude where we think we know what is best for other people. And it's very problematic because, for one, that creates dependency, where if others don't realize that they have a stake in what's going on, not only do we think we know better than them, but they might even think they are needing us to be part of what they need. And then in turn, that threatens the sustainability of the help that we are offering.
So, go back. I forgot to tell this story. There's a good example. When we were in Uganda, I was home. Steve wasn't home, but I got this knock on the door, which, of course, like we said, happened quite often. And this Ugandan man said, "Hello there. Hello, friend." He said, "I have some of your friends here." And I said, "Really?" Because
We weren't expecting
guests. And so I said, "Okay, well, let me come." And I came out, and he was a taxi driver, and he had these 3 white people in his taxi. And because they were white, of course, we all know each other, so they were my friends. And we were the only white people within like 50 or 60 miles, so everyone knew where we lived. And anyway, so there were these 2 women and this man, and they had decided at home, they were from the States, they decided that they were going to go to the most remote place in Africa that they could possibly find and get to, and they were going to hand out Bibles. That was their mission. They were going to hand out Bibles to these people and evangelize. And so they came to where we lived, pretty much, just a little bit further out in the bush, and started handing out Bibles to a bunch of people who were illiterate and who didn't speak English, and who mainly used books for, the paper was used for cooking, like kindling for their cooking fires, and toilet paper. So obviously these people did not have any consideration of the people that they were trying to help, and didn't consider the culture or really anything. And I don't know that, unfortunately, I believe they spent a lot of money and went through some hardship just to do that.
Yeah. So we did not want to, we wanted to have projects that expressed needs in the community, as well as were things that we personally had the ability to do, as well as served the goals of Peace Corps. And so we relied heavily on our host organizations to introduce us to the community and to identify those community needs. And yet ultimately the process by which we determined and the kind of projects that we had were very different, especially in relationship to our host organizations, because of the differences in those organizations.
So I worked with an organization called Madu AIDS Support Organization, or they called it MASO. Madu was the name of the town that we lived in. And it was a all-volunteer, community-based organization. People pretty much just came together to try to help people who had been affected by AIDS, HIV/AIDS, which is pretty much everybody. So at first I, tried to think of something that I could do with them. We kind of discussed trying to do an income generation project, and we also, had meetings about trying to start up a community garden project, which I really was interested in the community garden project, but they basically were just wanting me to do everything, and it just wasn't working. So when we came, Masso had already been involved with it was called a capacity building project with a very large, well-funded non-government organization, an NGO called Concern, that was based out of Ireland. And Concern had taken Masso on, and they were funding these projects through Masso. And so what I ended up doing was kind of helping them implement their projects at first. They had what they called a food security program, and once a year they were giving their clients who were HIV positive a bag of sugar and a bag of Posho, which was just like a cereal grain, and it might have lasted them a few days. And I said, well, how is that food security? You know, that's, when I think of food security, I think of having food for longer than just a few days. So I suggested that they give them beans because they grew very readily there, and if they had, you know, the seeds, then they could grow their own food. I mean, beans have a lot of protein, and it was, they still wanted to do the sugar. the people wanted the sugar. So they did that, but they did decide that the beans were a better idea, so they handed out the beans as well. And then also Masso had volunteers throughout the county. There were little towns throughout the county, and they were kind of a bit of a distance. So they had different volunteers that would be more local community, and
Herbalists.
Yeah, they would hand out, you know, homemade medicines and stuff like that too. So we did a nutrition class. I did a nutrition class for them, and then I made these posters for the office that we posted up in the office for anybody that came in. They could see, and it basically says, you know, what kind of nutrients you get from those kinds of foods, and just sort of help disseminate some information that way. And then the last big project that they had was an income generation project for orphans. And so Concern was going to do, this was going to be the last project they were funding for Masso. It was going to be a lot of money. And they decided that they were going to audit Masso. And come to find out, well, first of all, the bookkeeping was a nightmare. It was very overwhelming just to look at it. And a lot of the money had gone missing because two of the leaders in the organization in Masso had been skimming a lot of money off for their own purposes to improve their own lives and not help others with it. And so once that happened, those two men kind of, well, one of them, quote, they would say he ran away. He kind of just disappeared because he was scared. And actually he ended up selling he had a big chicken project that he had built up for himself, and he actually ended up selling all of his chickens and giving that money back to Masso. But the other man didn't care. He had built a big house, had a huge pig project, and he was not at all concerned about where that money came from or running away or anything. Anyway, so since they were being audited, we had to go through all of their books. And they didn't know how to do that. They didn't know how to do accounting. It was a foreign concept to them. It's not really set up in their culture. You know, I had to start from scratch with teaching these people how to do any of this stuff. Basic, you know, what is a deposit? What is a withdrawal in your account? How do you even set up the books to be able to see how the money goes, you know, where the money goes and everything. I had to start totally from nothing. So I spent 6 months, a good solid 6 months training mostly these two men. The one on the right he was the one that was there all the time with me. There were a couple other, one especially, Olive, she was there a lot too. So there was a picture of her earlier in the traditional dress with me. So anyway, we went through all that, months and months and months. One of the things that I really struggled with was just getting them to get me the bank statement for their bank account. I had no idea how much money they had in their bank account. they didn't know either. And
They thought they knew.
they thought they knew, but I kept trying to tell them, you know, the bank might be charging you money. You need to get the bank statement. 3 months in, you know, nothing. They had been in the town with the bank. Still, they'd come home. I'd say, "Did you get the bank statement?" No, we didn't get the bank statement. Well, they were being charged to get the bank statement. So that was one issue. But finally, one day I just had to yell at them and pound my fist on the table. "Get me the bank statement." "Oh, okay. You know, finally they brought the bank statement. They had almost no money left, and they were shocked to find out that yes, indeed, they had been being charged monthly fees to have their money in the bank. And they finally understood why I was saying, "Get me the bank statement." So we got the bank statement, got all the information done. We got the whole, everything. One of the funny stories was during all this time collecting all of the data, the volunteers, whenever they would have a whole county meeting, the volunteers would come into town and they would get refunded for their transportation fees. So they all had to sign a paper saying, "Yes, I received my transportation fees." And so we had all of these records of this. Well, there was one missing from one of the meetings. And so I said, "Okay, well, somebody needs to go around to all these people and they need to get all the signatures for them saying that they got this money. We need this paper." And so otherwise, basically the money was missing. It was more missing money. So one of my volunteers said, okay, yes, I will go. And he rode his bike everywhere. He was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But so several weeks later, he comes back with the paper. He says, "Here, I got you the paper. I got the signatures." And I looked at the paper, and it was very obvious that he had just signed all the names himself, done all of the signatures himself on the paper. And I said, "You've signed everything yourself. You have not gotten the signatures." And he looked at me shocked. He could not believe that I could tell that he said, "Okay, yes, I have done a big forgery." And we still laugh. We call it the forgery, you know. And so he was very meek about it, and he said, "Okay, I will really go and I will get the signatures." It took him quite some time, but he did. He finally got them all. So anyway, finally, months and months later, we were ready for for Concern to come in and look at our books. Well, there was still money missing because the one man was refusing to give back the money. And so they had to write a letter saying, you know, "This money is gone. This person took all this money, and we just don't have it. But the rest of everything else we have accounted for." And so they came in. The director of Concern for the country came and met with us, and then the man who was working with Masso also came. So we're having this meeting. The man who was working with Masso directly was saying that Masso could not be trusted and that they should not get the money for this orphan project.
And he was new.
He was newer, yeah.
He hadn't spent a whole lot of time. He
Yeah.
wasn't Emma, who we saw earlier.
Yeah, this was Emma, and Emma was very nice.
Good guy.
He was a good guy, and he worked well with us. But this other man came. Emma was placed somewhere else. So, you know, we had already gone to all of the communities and identified the orphans that we were going to include in the project. We had made, you know, certain parameters for the orphans. They had to have no parents, because a lot of the orphans, they were considered an orphan if they just had one parent. So they had to be within a certain age, youth, and they had to have no parents, and they had to have no real income of their own. And so the community knew about this project already, and they had a lot of mistrust of Masso because they knew that there were people that were getting money from Masso that weren't using it as it was supposed to be. And so I told the director, I said, okay, you know, if you refuse to fund this project, I'm telling you now that this organization will no longer exist after this. You are having a capacity building project with these people, and if you don't fund this project, they will no longer be here anymore. I said, they need this. We have to do this project for this to work. And so he said, you're right. You guys have already gone to the community. They know about it, and you're right. You're absolutely right. And so they did end up funding the project, and it actually went extremely well. And because we'd done all of the bookkeeping stuff, that went well as well. So that was a really good thing. And then so the projects were, they could choose either between doing a piggery project or a goat project. So it's very similar to heifer. And then this one girl wanted to become a seamstress, and she had actually found someone who was willing to teach her in town, and Masso ended up using some of the funding to buy her a brand new sewing machine, and so that gave her a big opportunity.
Pedal powered sewing machine.
Yeah. It was a good thing. So my greatest success story was our friend Olive. She was a co-wife to her husband, and she had a co-wife. She was a second wife, and both her husband and her co-wife had died from AIDS, and she was left with 15 children to take care of by herself as a single mother. And so her husband had he was a veterinarian, and the president of Uganda had a lot of cows because that was his tribe. They're cow herders, and he took care of the president's cows. And so after he passed, Olive got help from the government for school fees for her children. And so she would go, to the offices and try to get the money for school fees. Well, this one day she went, and they'd never done this before, but they said, okay, well, you need to fill out this budget. We need a budget from you so that we can confirm that you actually need this money. And they brought her the paper, and she said she was sitting there very nervous because she didn't know if she was going to be able to fill the paper out. Well, they brought it to her, and she realized that everything that I had been teaching her was what she needed to know to fill out this paperwork for her budget. And so she filled it out, and she said they took it, and they went in the room, and I just sat there, and I was very nervous. And they came back, and they said, good, the budget is good, here is your money, thank you very much, that's all we need from you. And she immediately came to our house when she got home to tell me that the training that I had given her helped her children and got her the money, that I had done a good thing. That's how she put it. You have done a very good thing. And that really just made all of it, everything worth all of it.
Indeed. So I was assigned to the Gomba Madu Health Center, and I was assigned to my Olive was Aaron's host organization counterpart, and I was assigned for my counterpart a woman who was there tasked with maintaining community health. And so she had to inform the community about TB and how to get treated for TB, as well as administer this deworming program for children in schools. And so I followed her around for a month, and it became clear to me that what she really was hoping that I would do is take over her responsibilities so that she could then be free to go to school. Well, that was not really what I had any interest in doing, and I didn't think it was part of Peace Corps' goals. And so I started looking for a different kind of way to go about this. Another idea that people had was that in this building here, there was a computer that a former volunteer had purchased for the health center through grants, I guess, and they were hoping that I could get them a printer for that computer. And since electricity was sporadic, the computer was only being able to be used occasionally, and I did do some kind of side projects with that computer, teaching people how to type and use the computer and that sort of thing, but I really didn't feel like that was something that would be good for, I didn't feel like it was sustainable. I didn't feel like it was a significant enough project for my work. So one day, someone came banging on my door and said, Steve, come quick, because we need you to be part of this meeting. It is very good for you to identify the needs for your project. I said, okay. So I got up and I got dressed and we headed out the door, and we all crammed ourselves into this white truck here. There was probably 8 of us, I want to say, 6 or 8 of us, and we drove over maybe 15 minutes to the next large medical center where we were going to have a meeting for the day, and the doctor was in. And we talked, well, they talked about the needs of the county and what the biggest health concerns were, and how many patients that they were seeing. Unfortunately, the whole meeting basically was done in the local language, and I did not understand 95% of it. So it wasn't doing me a whole lot of good, and I was rapidly losing interest, and it just kept going on, and I was getting hungrier and hungrier until 5 or 6 o'clock at night. They were finally wrapping up, and they said, okay, now it's time for lunch. And so I was just so thankful, and we concluded the meeting and went and got the food that was prepared, and I got my plate, and the first bite that I went to take, I uncovered a cockroach that had been pressed into the food. So I couldn't eat that, and I went and I found something else to eat, and just like some crackers, some cookies, just what I could find in the moment. And then we had to get on a taxi to go back to where we lived, because the doctor was taking the white truck into Kampala, into the capital, for whatever reason, we don't know. That's where he spent most of his time. But as I said, you get on the taxi in Kampala to go straight to the town that you're going to. So all of the taxis that were coming through the town that we were in, headed for the town we were going to, were already full when they left Kampala. So we had to board an already full taxi to be able to get to where we needed to go.
Not just full, but over full.
That's right. Because oftentimes we were not the first people to be picked up.
Yeah.
After
Well,
Kampala.
it was already usually over full before you even left the taxi park too.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I get on this taxi, and by the time I get home, 10-15 minute ride, my entire left side of my body has completely gone numb, because it's been pressed up against the side of the vehicle. I'm contorted in this funny way. But we make it home. I practically stumble and fall down because I can't feel my left side. But I finally make it home. Well, from there I was like, well, I've heard what the government has to say about, and the health center has to say about what my project should be. Let me widen my perspective. And so I learned how to say, in the local language, what can I do to help people to live more healthy? And I began asking everybody I met, what can I do to help people to live more healthy? Because I was connected to the health center. Now, I had been called to Uganda as a water and sanitation extension volunteer. And all through training, I kept waiting for the health, water, and sanitation training that I was going to get and never got any. And when I asked them, Peace Corps, about that, they said, well, you know, really AIDS is the biggest problem, and most likely you're going to be doing an AIDS project, and so we've been giving you all this AIDS training. Okay. And when I started asking people, what can I do to help people to live more healthy, almost everybody said, water is our biggest problem. So I began asking them, well, what about AIDS? And they said, well, AIDS is a big problem, but really water is the biggest problem. And it wasn't even the biggest problem in town there, because the town had a water tower that was electric pump fed when the electric was on, and then it would be full, and there were pipelines that ran out to different areas in town where there were people who were tasked with the job of selling that water, and that money was used for maintenance of those pipes and the water tower and the electricity. But further out in the area, they didn't have as many of these water catchment where they have tanks where they can collect the rainwater. They didn't have as many borehole wells with hand pumps to pump up the water, where the town we lived in had all of these things. And then I even went to the district water officer and talked with him, and he said, yes, water is a big problem in that area, and there are a few different ways that you can address that problem: water catchment and borehole wells, and even these dams where they would kind of make reservoirs for cattle and people to draw water from, water that would wash off the land around them. And so I started going around the area, and I asked about all these broken down wells, because I kept finding wells around, but they didn't work. And they were projects that people had done, outside organizations, other countries who had come in and put in these wells, and the communities just hadn't repaired them. There was even a project that brought tools to repair these wells, and the district had this set of tools that they could give to different people who had been trained to repair these wells, and still these wells sat unused and broken. So I decided to look into developing water in the surrounding area of the town that I lived in. And I visited with, they were called L1s. They were the local government leaders, the very lowest level of government in Uganda. And I went with a person from the health center to meet with these L1s to set up community meetings if they thought that was a good idea. And at these meetings, we would ask them to ask the community, are you interested in developing water? And they all said yes. And I said, okay, so then I need people to work with. I would like 5 people one person with some kind of technical experience, construction, mechanical experience, in any kind. 2 people who speak English, and 2 people who are community leaders. And so sometimes they were teachers who could speak English, sometimes they were medical staff who could speak English, sometimes they were community leaders in terms of politicians or religious leaders. And then sometimes the people with technical experience were builders or mechanics. And I set up groups in like 5 different areas and ended up with 2 groups, this group and this other group, that were in neighboring communities. And we set up 2 projects with these 2 groups to develop water resources, and it became obvious that the solution that was best was to create borehole wells and to raise, and I expressed the need that there was going to have to be some kind of community contribution, some kind of effort or money that the community brought to bear on this issues as part of the solution that we were going to do. And I was ready to write grants, which included that community contribution, and yet we still had to go around and collect the money. But even when we were identifying the need and the kind of water to develop, it became, people said, well, what we need is the district water engineer. And so I called him up and talked with him, and he said, yes, I would love to come out and talk about where you might find water in your area and what kind of water developments you might do. Unfortunately, I need to see the area, and I cannot come out because the money that has been budgeted for gas to get me there has been already spent for the year. But if you could provide that money for the gas, then I can come out. Well, I was all kinds of skeptical about this. I was like, this guy's just trying to turn a buck for doing his job, and talked with the people, and I said, really, I don't think this is a good idea. And they said, no, we need this man to come out. We need him to help us in this work. And I said, well, where's the money going to come from? And they said, we will raise the money. And so sure enough, they got the money together. I don't know where it came from. I didn't touch the money, but they collected the money, they had it, and they gave it to him when he came. And I was encouraged by this because it was already, they were invested in the work, and it was transparent that this money was being raised and given to this person. So what I was not so supportive of was the sub-county chief, that when he heard that we were raising a cash community contribution, he thought that, well, what he said was that the money should be kept in the sub-county headquarters. And when I talked to my people about that, they said, oh no, we will never see that money again if we give that money to him. And so I was not supportive of that, and he was really not happy about it. But in the end, it really seemed like he didn't think he could do anything about it, and so nothing really came of it. Thankfully. So we needed to raise this community contribution in these 2 areas. And one of the problems that people said, because it was taking a long time to raise this community contribution, and I had gotten receipt books for the people to keep track of who gave how much, because they couldn't give all the money that for their part, because the group had decided that we would divide the total community contribution up by household. And so it turned out that each household had to pay about 5,000 shillings, which would be maybe $3 US. And yet they didn't have all this cash, and we were talking about why it was taking a while, and they said, well, many people have things, but they don't have cash to give. Maybe we could have an auction so that people could buy those things, and then we could have that money go to their contribution. great. That sounds fantastic. And so the best day that I had in Uganda was this day of the auction. Now, I had made 2 pumpkin pies, a dozen cinnamon rolls, 2 dozen chocolate chip cookies, and 2 dozen snickerdoodles, and bagged them up and had them boxed up the pies and had it all ready to go. We loaded up this bike, and I was pushing the bike and Erin was walking with me, and we got up early in the morning, and it was about 5 kilometers from where we lived to the site. And as we're walking along, this man rides up on his bike and goes, "Hey, where are you going?" We told him. He's like, "Oh, I can help you." He said, she can ride with me. Okay, so Erin hops on the back of his bike. I hop on the bike that I was pushing, and we ride there and get there in no time. And I said, "For your trouble here, you may have whatever you like. What would you like?" And he's like, "What is this?" And we told him that it was a pumpkin pie, and he's like, "I would like this." We said, "Great, take it." So he took that and went on his way. And when we got there, they said, "Now, what is this that you've brought?" And I said, well, I explained what it all was, and they said, "Now, nobody knows what these things taste like. Why would they buy them?" I said, "Well, we could have samples that we could give out." And they said, yes, we should do that. So we gave out samples, and then I handed over all the things to them, and they decided how much each thing should be sold for. And they ran the whole auction. Erin and I just sat by and watched it all happen. They kept track of how much money was collected for each thing. It was just wonderful. It was just so much fun.
It was so fun. They just had a blast with it.
So everything that I brought sold. So we had nothing to take back.
They were like almost fighting over it at the end. They're like, "No, there's only one more bag of those, you know." You have to share.
Yeah, so it was good stuff. It was really good.
Yeah.
And in the end, there was one borehole that we were able to get funding through a grant and get that constructed while I was there. I had to stay an extra month to see that out. And then the other community raised their community contribution, but because we didn't have the grant, we gave that money over to the district, and the district had a program where they were putting in wells with...
If they gave the community contribution, then the district would build the well.
That's right. And so that other well went in the year after I left. And so we did end up getting two wells put in because of my time there.
Yeah. So the conclusion, one of the biggest things that we learned in our service was that if you want to try to help people or make a difference in people's lives, it's all about the relationships. You have to have relationships with your community. You have to have relationships with the people in the community to find ways to improve the life within that community. You can't just come in and think you know everything and just decide, "I'm going to do this," and they have to have ownership of it. It has to mean something to them.
Even in international development, there needs to be a series of relationships whereby that link can be made between the donor and the beneficiary, so that there is trust built at each step of those relationships, so that all along the way there is trust and understanding about what's going on.
Even where we lived, there were several borehole wells that had been built by organizations that just came in, had all the money for it, and just did it themselves and left. And they they literally just sat there broken. Nobody was fixing them because they said, well, that's so and so's well, and they'll come back and
They'll fix
fix
it.
it. But they never were coming back. No one was ever coming back, and it just sat there.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the involvement in the community came up with the contribution. The community participated in the whole project. Those were their wells, and they'll maintain those, and they have maintained them. So,
Well, thank you so much.
thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.